Today, we'll focus on malnutrition, food systems, and public policies. And this webinar comes at a perfect time because of the upcoming UN Food Systems Summit. I'm very excited to present our speaker today, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. She is the special envoy of the UN Secretary General to the 2021 Food Systems Summit. As the special envoy, Dr. Kalibata works with the UN system and with key partners to provide leadership guidance and direction toward the summit. She was born in Rwanda to smallholder farmers displaced during the struggle for independence in the early 1960s. She studied entomology and biochemistry at Makerere University in Uganda before earning her PhD from the University of Massachusetts in the United States. After a distinguished career as a research scientist, she returned to Rwanda to serve as Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources from 2008 to 2014. Her leadership helped to transform agriculture in Rwanda, moving it from food insecurity to food security. Since 2014, Dr. Kalibata has also served as president of AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. She is an agricultural scientist, a policymaker, and an important thought leader. May I present our speaker for today, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Kalibata.
Thank you for the introductory remarks, Jerry, and I apologize alongside your apologies that we are starting a bit late. But here we are, and I'm going to go through this presentation pretty fast so that you can get a sense of what we are trying to do in the Food System Summit and how it relates to the challenge of malnutrition and the policy environment in malnutrition that impacts nutrition and malnutrition. So maybe we go to the next slide. So the Food System Summit is I would say, a universe that really looks at a number of things. It looks at, first of all, how we come through on SDGs that are impacting, the food system impacts all 17 SDGs, and it's going to be really, really important that we identify those pieces that speak to that. But here we are specifically interested in the challenge of hunger. And you can, just on that slide, you can see that today we talk about 690 million people that have gone hungry. And there are a number of other things and challenges of food systems. The fact that we still have a significant number of people that are not having the right level of nutrition, but also we now live through the double burden of nutrition and obesity, irrespective of where in the world all our countries have that challenge. What really varies is the degree and the extent to which that happens. We also impact our environment. You can see here that we're talking about 34% contribution to climate change from food systems and 80% biodiversity loss, 70% use of water, responsible for 80% deforestation, and of course 25% energy. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is the whole food system perspective, that we work in a food system, and what we are trying to move is not just food security, because food security is at the center of this. The Food Summit is about people. It's also about how we use the environment to be able to feed people. So let's go to the next slide. So the Secretary General in 2019 launched the Food System Summit, really recognizing that the Food System Summit is the solution. It might be part of the problem. I've just enumerated a number of the problems, but it's going to have to be part of the solution when we look at how we come through in the next 10 years of trying to come through on SDGs. He actually said that this scientific consensus, the food system is one of the biggest opportunities for us to solve the problems that we are facing in the food system. And then COVID-19. Interestingly, before COVID-19 really happened around March last year, the Food System Summit had been launched, but the interest was very low. The COVID-19 kind of puts things in perspective for us, really highlighting that irrespective of where in the world, there are very many vulnerable people among us that are only living, one season away or one day away from hunger or poor nutrition, and that we needed to focus on these people. So unleashing bold new action was part of what he was thinking about, unleashing innovation, unleashing strategies and policies that might help us really look at how these challenges get addressed is what he had in mind when he launched the Food Systems Summit. Next slide. I talked about COVID-19, but I just want here to highlight that the number of people that have fallen out of food as a result of COVID-19, of acceptable food levels, and sometimes even in a crisis of 135 million people that are outside their acceptable food, ability to access food. 368 million children that would be accessing school meals don't have the ability to access school meals. And of course, on all our minds, the triple burden of malnutrition becomes very clear. And then the fact that COVID just rides on that, takes advantage of the challenge that nutrition has already created, whether it's obesity or malnutrition. And really, most of the people that are being impacted have one of those challenges. All are impacted worse than people under other brackets. So really a major challenge when it comes to nutrition and the relationship between food security and nutrition and COVID has been underscored. Next slide. So as we go into the Food Systems Summit, we really are looking to achieve a few things. We are hoping that the Secretary General would come up with a very strong statement guiding how we engage in food systems in the next 10 years. And I say guiding how we engage in food systems in the next 10 years very deliberately, because food systems requires us to think, to have a systemic approach to food, to think about the different institutions and the different sectors that are necessary to engage, to ensure that we move our food systems forward. In many countries, food system is a major industry that is responsible for 50% of the industrial sector of that country. If you looked at it from production to processing to service sector and all the other things it is impacting, really takes like 50% of what's happening. So a major part. So guiding how and being able to be deliberate around how we engage going forward is going to be important. Then he also wanted to make sure that member states are coming up with policies. Here we're talking about policies as well. There's nothing that we can move unless we are very clear on the kind of policies and investments that get to happen because of those policies. So what we are working on now is ensuring that nations are developing pathways that will help them clarify policies, but also clarify investments. Then he was also talking about bold new action. When we go into this, what type of things are we going to do differently? What are we going to do together as partners, taking advantage of SDG 17 partnerships and really coming through for people? And then the engagement of communities, recognizing that each of us has a place in our food system. Each of us makes a decision to eat 3 times a day, and that decision impacts our food system. So there's also that individual responsibility that we must underscore. And then, of course, having some follow-up mechanism that will allow it to come through. So we hope to see a lot of individual action, community action, but also national level action and commitment that would take us through the next 10 years. Next slide. Here we've engaged, the Food Systems Summit. We call the Food Systems Summit a People's Summit, mostly because we want to put people at the center of coming through on whatever we are doing at the food system. So we have a number of things that have been happening around the world. We've engaged on national level dialogues, we've engaged in independent dialogues, but we also have action tracks working to come up with solutions and game-changing ideas that would help us move forward. We also have the scientific group that is working on the science of the summit to really help us and tell us the interface with the different parts of the Food Systems Summit. In all those groups, all the conversations that have happened, one thing that we decided to do at the end is to bring all those areas together and agree on what they see as priorities that are coming out. Each time they have these dialogues, what's emerging as the critical priorities. And as you all are here for, you can imagine nourishing people was number 1, right? Which is about nutrition, which is about ending hunger. So nourishing people, all the groups agreed that dealing with the challenge of nourishing people is going to have to be number 1. Number 2 was the issue of climate change and biodiversity. Number 3, which is related to number 1, is livelihoods and well-being, looking at how people access jobs, looking at how people access living income in the food system, and so many other things. Number 4 is about empowered communities, and here we are talking about the level of access to knowledge that people have, but also the rights that people have to be able to come through on the things they need to come through on. And then resilience building on the back of COVID, but also resilience building on the back of climate change, recognizing that people and communities are suffering and really we need to do something about it. And then there's the whole issue of knowledge and innovation, really recognizing that we need to keep innovating. The food system is extremely dynamic, it's extremely complex and large. If we are going to stay on top of our challenges, we need to keep sharing information, but also we need to keep innovating. So these are the areas that were identified by all groups as the critical areas we need to focus on. You might say this is everything, and yes, it has a lot of stuff, but those are the critical areas we need to be working with. Next slide. So to narrow down then to nutrition, we have this action track that focuses on access to safe and nutritious food, which identified 3 areas: promoting food security and improving food security. That's the end hunger question, improving access to nutritious food and making food safe. Part of the nutrition problems come and challenges we have with obesity also come from the safety of food. So I'll not go into the others, but I want to break this down a bit. So next slide. On action track 1, sorry, just one second. On action track 1, you will see that if you can click again, here we are promoting food safety and end hunger. There are already a number of areas that have been identified. These are areas that have come from working with action track areas. You know, there are people that are working on these action tracks, trying to listen to different people and getting ideas on what are considered game-changing ideas. These are some of the ideas that have come out that can help us deal with this particular challenge. Next slide. So here on improving access to nutritious food, there are a number of suggestions that we would be suggesting to member states and others that are interested. And these are action areas that are coming out of what the discussions that we've been having on the action tracks. Let's go to the next slide. I'll skip this, it's the same. Let's go to the next slide. That particular slide was talking about being able to do that in the context of food safety. Now, I see we've used the first presentation, so which means that we missed some of the slides that we have put. No, this is the slide I wanted. So in this particular slide, I wanted to tell you that I talked to you about dialogues that are happening in countries. Now we have 133 countries undertaking dialogues. So dialogues are going on across the world. You can see every continent of the world is engaged in dialogues. And these are very important because they help us think through how else to come through on food systems, new ways of coming through on food system, but also sectoral thinking that comes together and the country level thinking that needs to come together to move food systems forward. So this is something we're extremely proud of, and we hope that this is something that can continue even after the food system summit to ensure that conversations continue. Next slide. All this work is really Food System Summit, leading international pathways is all in support of us coming through, supporting member states to come through on SDGs because we are behind on a number of SDGs where we should be on track. We are behind and we only have 9 seasons. If you're a farmer, like I grew up in a farming landscape, we only have 9 seasons to go to come through on poverty, to come through on all the things that we've talked about and come through on malnutrition despite the number of people that we have. So we need major effort, we need major investments. Next slide. So on this slide, I want to conclude by recognizing the audience that I'm speaking to journalists. And I consider journalists to be some of the most important people of our time because they shape our world, they help shape our world, they shape the thinking, they shape how we go forward, they shape how we invest, and they shape how much we know and how much knowledge becomes common knowledge or gets restricted. So I really hope that you use this as an opportunity to get to understand what we are trying to achieve from a food systems perspective. I hope that you use it as an opportunity to try to understand what you need to know to be able to help us advance the food systems cause and what we are trying to achieve. And I want you also to educate yourself so that you see this as an opportunity for us to challenge leaders. Our food systems have never had a better chance than this, a time to pivot from a food system that is challenged in so many ways to a food system that could be different. It will take a lot of commitment, it will take a lot of engagement, and people have to be prepared to do this. From journalists to heads of state, we have to be committed to doing this. So over to you. This is where you find the information. All the information that I talked about is found on this website. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Mercedes Vallagues. I am the host for the conversation, and we have lots of things to discuss and plenty of questions that are coming up on the chat. Just very briefly, let me say that of course, we have a digital wall, a Padlet, for you to post the takeaways and the feedback after the webinar. The link will be in the chat. And in the middle of this, we will do a poll to see, see how you're thinking about a number of issues. But first and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Agnes Kalibata for this really informative presentation about one of the major newsworthy summits for the world that will take place this year. And this is also helping journalists be prepared to cover it or to get stories on food systems in their own countries. But first, let me start by asking you a question. You grew up as a refugee in Uganda. Your parents were smallholders. Has this early connection to the land, to nature, to agriculture, and to food shape your work, the work that you're doing now as a professional and as an adult?
So thank you, I appreciate the question. Excuse me. Mostly because, yes, at a very early age, I was able to appreciate that food is not something we take for granted, that food is something people work for. That food is not everywhere, that actually people have challenges accessing food. So I had a very early experience with that. I also saw people work and use food to be able to come through on livelihoods, send their children to school. Like I was sent to school as a kid of a smallholder farmer because my dad could farm. So when I went into school, I got another form of appreciation that actually it doesn't have to be a struggle, that farmers don't have to struggle the way they do to be able to have enough food, that there are technologies that can support them, right? Whether it is how farmers access improved seeds so that they can have better yields, whether it is how farmers access markets so that they can have a reason to want to do more, that there are ways you can do things. So I really went into this area knowing fully well that I had an opportunity to impact people and probably shape their lives in ways my own parents' lives were not shaped because we didn't have access. I can actually influence how farmers get access today. My institution actually works based purely on access, on ensuring that farmers in rural communities have access to things that can help them increase their yields. So yes, it has really shaped the work that I do today.
Thank you. And we had a participant that we wanted to ask questions. He's right now, he's not online, he's from Zimbabwe, that may explain that. So let me ask you another question while we go on to the second participant we had lined up. And so, has the coronavirus pandemic added a sense of urgency to the UN Food Summit? And can you describe or list some or the main weaknesses and inequities in the food system that have been exposed in a bright light by COVID-19?
So yeah, yes, the answer is yes. The coronavirus has exposed some of the weaknesses in the food system, and probably one of the major weaknesses is just the level and ability of people to afford food. Most people have jobs that do not secure the ability to have a decent meal every meal, each of the 3 times, into ensuring that their families have access to a decent meal. A lot of people have had to compromise on what they put on the table based on how much they earn. So yes, the coronavirus has shown that we have a lot of jobs that are not secure enough to provide for lots and lots of families across the world. It has also shown that our food systems are fragile from a logistics perspective. So if we have built so much interconnectedness within our food systems, and if you get something like the coronavirus that limits how communities interact, how people engage, definitely it calls to question the ability of communities to survive. One of the things here on the African continent that I checked out immediately this happened was to look at the status of national strategic reserves in our countries. Because if nobody's going to be moving food, if nobody's going to be moving, if food is going to be restricted from different countries, what happens to countries? How do you ensure that people don't starve? So yes, there are a number of things that have been put to question by the coronavirus. And I think going forward, some of those questions would have to be addressed.
Thank you. We'll now pass the floor to Leda Balbino from Brazil. Leda, can you hear me? Over to you.
Yeah. Good morning for everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is, could you give examples of how the pandemic has disrupted the implementation of public policies to combat malnutrition throughout the world?
I mean, there are so many examples, I guess, on how the nutrition has interrupted. I mean, the virus has interrupted public policy. First of all, in nearly every country, there are programs that are implemented to deal with the challenge of malnutrition, especially for those that are, overly exposed, children that are suffering and all that. This depends on the ability of countries to have a healthy health budget. Those budgets have been put to question. The ability to ensure that some of the weak get the type of medical care that they were looking for, especially as a result of COVID, those budgets have been disrupted. So the weakest countries, the countries that needed to be able to really stay the course with regards to malnutrition and nutrition and ensure that children are being fed, 368 million children that were receiving school meals don't receive school meals. The number of people that have fallen out of the ability to feed their families has gone up tremendously. So these are some of the things in which COVID has affected the people's ability to access food. But also then government's own budgets. Prioritization of budgets goes more to dealing with COVID and fighting COVID as a disease to cure people and to keep it away, rather than ensuring that we double down on some of the challenges we already have, like malnutrition. So those are some of the examples I can think of.
This is a question from Jessica Hedor from Ghana. You mentioned the interest for food systems was generally low even before COVID. What could be the factor behind this low interest, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, I said the interest was low before COVID. First of all, being able to understand the complexity of the food system is something that was not going to happen that easily. The reason it was easy for people to pick interest and try to understand is the link between the COVID-19 crisis and the food system. The fact that COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease that comes from us encroaching on food system, on an environment, basically looking for food. People are going to look for food, and as a result, something happens. And there are most of zoonotic diseases cross from animals to people, and that has happened, especially a lot. It has happened a lot as we encroach on natural ecosystems. So that was number one. Number two, excuse me. Number two, it is the type of impact it was having. The type of impact it was having was directly threatening people's food security, ability to access food through the interconnected trade regimes that we have created, the extra cost of food that is happening as a result of COVID-19, and then just the not knowing how long this would last and the ability to continue farming activities, the disruption of farming activities, the disruption of markets, and all that really made people think twice and say, there's something here that we need to think through. You know, our food systems as we know them are threatened because markets are no longer functioning, because we are encroaching on the environment in ways we shouldn't be. So all those things woke people up to the fact that food needs to be looked at from a system perspective, how it impacts people, but also how it impacts the environment and vice versa. So we got a lot of interest in the complexity of the food system. And now really we have had a major engagement globally. And I would say that, everybody's engaged and everybody's waiting to see how we can transition some of our biggest challenges in food systems.
Let's go to Sandra, who's ready with a very good question. Sandra, over to you.
Hi there. So there's extreme inequality in land tenure in a lot of Latin American countries. So I was wondering if access to land for subsistence and small farmers is highlighted in the Food System Summit dialogues.
Thank you. The question on access to land and land tenure is extremely important for smallholder farmers, but it's extremely important for women farmers and the rights to land. So these are some of the challenges that are being looked at in the food systems as well, mostly because the ability to provide great stewardship of our land resources comes from the level of ownership that people find and the relationship that people have with the land. So even now, as I finish having a conversation with you, I'm going to be talking to indigenous peoples, and one of the challenges that is associated with indigenous peoples is the ability to really be able to have, in some places, not in all, in some places, have good rights to the land they are using, but they are not the only ones that are impacted. Smallholder farmers, access to better land, viable land, so that their farming can be viable, access to rights to land. These are all things that we are discussing and that will have to come out in the Food Systems Summit.
Good, thank you. Right. Rafael from Malawi?
Yes, I'm Malawi.
Okay, over to you.
Thanks, Arati. My question is, funding is key in the implementation of food security in order to avoid a malnutrition crisis. So if COVID-19 hitting countries' economies hard, what policies could be adopted to improve both food security and malnutrition?
Thank you for that question. So I'm thinking that there must be a number of policies we can adopt that would help us have the double benefit of food security and malnutrition. One of them is looking at types of crops that we grow. I know particularly in Malawi, because we do have work in Malawi, that in one of the previous droughts that would have been a disaster, growing orange fresh sweet potatoes in those droughts came in extremely handy. One, because it is drought resistant. Two, because it is fortified with vitamin A. Three, because it's a source of energy. So you basically are able to get a source of energy, fortification, access to vitamin A, and drought resistance in one crop. So there are a number of initiatives like that that can be found and applied to countries and allow countries to be able to double down and deliver better nutrition. But then there are also other things we can do around managing post-harvest losses, so that whatever we get, whatever yields we get, we are able to preserve them and be able to use them much longer than is needed. I mean, than would usually be the case. So I see cases where farmers are able to do more months in a year than they have been doing, and especially if the crop is nutritious, again, like I said earlier, that becomes important. But even the ability to cover bad days or bad months because you've gotten good yields is extremely important. So it's the ability to be able to cover those days when you wouldn't have food, but also the ability to be able to use the right type of food that gives you a double, triple benefit. And those are happening more and more. There's a whole lot of work that the CGIAR has done that puts a lot of nutritious foods on the table that allows us to access nutrition and resilience at the same time and increased productivity at the same time. So I hope that we can take advantage of some of these. But also there are things we can do in strengthening the ability of people to access these types of food by ensuring that they are affordable. And again, governments can put in place policies that advance certain types of food, but also that advance the ability of people to have these types of food, whether it is around social protection, stronger school meals, and things like that, that really ensure that people have access to the opportunity to have good nutrition.
Thank you. And now we go over to Mary Rose Abraham, who is calling in from India.
Hi, Dr. Kalibata. I just had a quick question for you. I wanted to talk to you about the protests and criticisms that have come up starting last year around the Food Systems Summit. And farmers and a lot of rights groups are saying that it's going to be promoting agribusiness and corporate interest over ecology, and that there will be a stress on fertilizers and pesticides and genetic engineering. So I would love to hear your feedback about the criticisms and to better understand this. Thank you.
Unmute yourself, Dr. Kalibata, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Like I said at the end of the presentation, I gave you a website that has all the resources of the food system across the whole food system. It is really important for you to check them out and see if any of these resources are promoting those things, right? So it would be really, really important for you to look at them. It would also be important for you to look at when it comes to game-changing solutions and ideas. These things are not being promoted by the food system. These things are coming from member states. These things are coming from civil society. They're coming from all over the place, including businesses. These are ideas that are coming from all of us. So I don't think it is right, first of all, to say that this is being done to promote interests of businesses. I have no reason to believe that the UN system, that these businesses need the UN system to put in place a food system summit to advance their interests. I don't think that that is realistic, or I don't think that that is even possible. So number one. Number two, the work that has been done is tapping into everybody. We are tapping into all sorts of everybody, young people. For example, in our action tracks, which are led by civil society people, the vice chairs, many of them are young people, and we've tried to ensure that we get people from the north and the south and really have a good mix of people so that the challenges we share globally are understood around the table, even as we're having conversations. And the solutions are coming from universities, they're coming as they're coming from member states, as they're coming from private sectors, they're coming from SMEs. For example, we have an upcoming SME competition, which really focuses on small businesses in these countries that have nothing to do with big businesses, but recognizing that a food system is made of businesses and people and all that. So I will say one thing though in concluding on this. We are very clear that this is a people's summit. And being a people's summit, we are very clear that we want to hear every voice. And hearing every voice means that we give everybody an opportunity to put their ideas on the table, whether it's a UN system. The UN system has a way of putting ideas on the table. They form the UN task force. Communities, we have now the Food System Heroes, which is a place where you can log in just to see what is happening and engage. Nations, we will not leave, we will not lock out anybody in terms of voice, in terms of access to information. We feel that that's our responsibility. So the idea of representing a few people, the idea was never about representation. it was about gathering information, and information is from everybody. And we have that information. We've done a big process that the UN has never done before. We've laid out a huge process that reaches millions of people, and a huge process that collects thousands of ideas that are going to be made available. At the end of the day, the Food Systems Summit and its outcomes and the use of its outcomes is completely voluntary. It's up to people to use them. The question is, do we have the information that people can use? That was our job, to make sure that we pull all this together and we ensure that everybody has knowledge of what is at stake and what needs to be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we're going into the sea and seafood. We have a question from Nick Aspinwall, which is also very much related to the UN summit, in the sense that the seas are a common good, and it can be difficult to regulate or enforce legislation when so many fishing boats and trawlers are going all over the place. Nick Aspinwall, can you answer live?
Yes, hello. Yeah, my question is about the global seafood industry, which is a major contributor to environmental degradation and is closely linked to systemic labor abuse. So given the longstanding difficulties of establishing and enforcing regulations governing international waters and the non-cooperation of some state and private actors, I'm wondering, how can global stakeholders firmly address these issues and actually enforce sustainability measures and labor standards at sea?
Okay, so there are a number of things that are currently going on. Remember, there's also the Ocean Summit that is happening later this year, and we are engaged with them. And these are some of the challenges they are looking at. But from where we are sitting from a food systems perspective, we are also looking at the challenges of two things. The degradation of the sea ecosystem and the waters in general, lakes, rivers, and seas ecosystem that's being degraded from a food system perspective, whether it's how much we waste, whether it's how much we overdo things, and whether it's how much we really damage that environment. So that's number one. But there's also the economy perspective and the nutrition perspective, which recognizes that the blue economy is a huge part of where we need to be going. The aquatic economy that is in many countries is a huge opportunity that is underexploited. So there are a number of policies that need to be made around here to make sure that we secure these resources, because they are some of the best resources we have, but also we rehabilitate these resources where we need to rehabilitate them. Recently, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, we had a dialogue, a blue economy dialogue, and these dialogues are continuing to go on. And then we have the oceans conversations that are going on. All these are geared at ensuring that we are discussing the challenges and we are looking at pathways to get out of these problems. Pathways will define the type of strategies and the type of policies that countries need to take going forward. So I want to reassure you that it is at the center of the conversation. One of the things that a number of partners are looking at is even the ability to form a coalition that recognizes the partnerships that need to be formed to protect the blue economies of island states, but also nations that live on blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a question from Brian Malika, and then we'll go into the poll. And meanwhile, let's do that first. Brian, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you so much for Dr. Agnes Kalibata. So Africa has an increasing population that is ballooning very fast, and this means that we need food. And out of that, there's the pressure to produce more and more food, and many farmers in Africa have resorted to chemicalized fertilizers and other sorts of fertilizers to boost the growth of plants faster so that they can meet the ballooning population. And also, in terms of rearing animals like cows and other types of animals that are consumed in Africa, we have many chemicals that boost the growth of animals and all that. Looked at food preservatives, there are a lot of chemicals that are helping to increase the food production and to keep the food to stay for longer. So my question to you, Dr. Agnes, is that within the next decade of food nutrition and ambition in Africa, Is there a framework to ensure that the safety of food in Africa is restored? Is there such a discussion? Thank you.
That's a great question, really important question. The safety of food, first, primarily, it's about people, ensuring that people are accessing safe and nutritious food. It's not just for Africa, it's going to have to be a global problem that we address. Some countries have taken very strong measures to ensure the safety of food, especially given the burden or what we are calling the hidden cost of food on our health, but also the environment. So in Africa, some of the things that are going to have to be taken into consideration when it comes to the hidden cost of food, countries are going to have to think about the types of investments they are going to do to make sure that they reduce the impact on the environment. Because you see, using fertilizers is something that people have done for now over 100 years. And the truth is, Africa is not using a lot of fertilizers. But this is the opportunity we get to not even go down that road. We don't need to go down that road. We need to decide what will work for us going forward. If recognizing the impact that fertilizers have on the environment, there must be ways of producing food and doing the right thing by the environment. So that ability to have the right balance. The question of Africa's nutrition and Africa's ability to access food is not going to be solved overnight. We have to continue working on ensuring that we solve the challenge of food security and ending hunger. That's a primary question. But recognizing that we are doing that against an environment that we need to save and secure. Right now, we do have a lot of degradation that doesn't come from fertilizers. The degradation we need to worry about is the one that comes from cutting more forests, losing more soil because we are not doing the right things when it comes to farming. So we need to address those challenges together. The challenge of natural degradation coming from agricultural systems, when farmers depend on more land to produce more food, but also the challenge of soil, of land degradation as we apply more fertilizers. We don't need to be doubling down on fertilizers. We need to be reducing how much we are using, and we need to be smart around how we can use less to produce more. And those opportunities are there. And it's really important that people understand that we are going to have to rethink our food systems. So the summit provides that opportunity that we start thinking about food systems from a perspective of a system, all the way from people to the environment, and of course to the economies that we are trying to secure.
But a very big thanks to Dr. Agnes Kalibata for your time and for the passion that you put into it. We're all looking forward towards the Food System Summit. Do you have any closing remarks, Dr. Kalibata?
Well, I was just going to really thank the journalists that have made it to this meeting today for the opportunity to be able to talk to you. I wanted to just underscore that there's never been a time like this now in our lives where we have an opportunity to rethink and reshape how our food systems work for people, but also for our planet, and an opportunity to help people understand what is at stake. So I'm counting on you as journalists to really take the word out there, to help people understand that we've come at crossroads and we need to come out better. We are people, we can do it, we have the ability to do it, and I trust that we can do very well when it comes to taking the right decisions. So thank you so much.